Little gun, big damage. The fast gunner powerhouse Memento has been a joke for a long time, but that stops today. Capable of absolutely chunking boss's health in just a few well-placed shots, the Memento is hands down the most powerful pistol in one's human. But at what cost? And why do very little people run such a strong weapon and build? What's up, y'all? Hater here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going over a fast gunner build featuring the pistol Memento and a supporting cast of weapons that will let you take this once memed on weapon into any activity. On top of that, Memento is getting a focus box in the wish machine in the upcoming PvP scenario, Prism vs Clash. So even if you're more of a PvE player, you might want to hop in and snag some easy fragments to build or even upgrade this damage powerhouse. On top of showing the build I've been enjoying running as of late, I'll talk about some variants that can give you either more consistent or even higher damage depending on what you're looking for from the build. And yes, I'm going to show some dummy testing and actual Prime War footage in the background so you can see that, yes, this hits like a truck in both a controlled environment and in actual practical use. As always, I'll have a short section later in the video that's timestamped if you want to just look at everything without an explanation, but I recommend watching the entire video. One, because I explain how and why everything works together, and two, it helps me out as a creator. Either way, let's get into it. First and foremost, Memento is a fast gunner weapon, so let's go over exactly what that means. Fast Gunner is a continuous buff that, when activated, grants a 1% increase to both your rate of fire and attack for 2 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. By itself, Fast Gunner sounds pretty underwhelming at first, despite it directly buffing your attack stat, but this is just the foundation, and it will become even more lethal the more we dive into the build. For the purposes of this build, you want to spec into both weak spot and weapon damage, as those will offer the most benefit from how everything is set up. As with all others, damage type is up to you, though I would shy away from normal damage as you probably won't be using Memento to clear ads unless you just want to be that guy that sends your friends screenshots bragging about their DPS against the incredibly lethal test dummy. So go for elite and great ones damage as much as possible. Reload speed bonus is preferred over mag capacity with this setup. Again, I'll get to that later when I cover the mods. Now let's talk about the weapon Memento itself. It has 4 weapon features. First and foremost, hits grant a 36% chance to trigger Fast Gunner. The chance doubles up to 72% when you're hitting a weak spot. When Fast Gunner is triggered, 1 bullet will be reloaded to your magazine. Each shot has a 40% chance to consume 1 more bullet, and when that extra bullet is consumed, your attack is increased by a whopping 80%. Additionally, it deals penetration damage, meaning it will deal more damage to Rosetta enemies, though most of the bosses in the game that you'll be using this against are not Rosetta, so you won't really notice this too much unless you're using it for elites or random ad clear. For weapon calibrations, you can go one of 2 ways. If you want a harder hitting and more burst DPS focused weapon, then you'll want to go with the precision style calibration, mainly to increase both your attack and range while losing 10% fire rate, so that can be offset with food buffs. And if you want a faster and more consistent uptime on your fast gunner stacks, then you'll want to use the rapid shot style calibration. This will increase your rate of fire and mag capacity to help offset reloading the weapon as frequently, but you lose 15% of your attack. I've messed around with both of these calibrations, and more often than not, I find myself leaning on the precision style for things like Prime Wars and solo monolith bosses, but when I'm in a group, I tend to run rapid shot style just for fun. For the mod on Memento, you're going to want Shooting Blitz, preferably with the Fast Gunner intrinsic, to both increase the duration of Fast Gunner from 2 seconds to 6, making it so you can keep your stacks up when you have to reload, and increasing your weapon damage by 15%. The other Fast Gunner weapon mods are more geared towards the LMG and shotgun in my opinion, so you can confidently skip those. These are the attachments that I run in order to max accuracy for shooting over the shoulder instead of aiming down sights. And if I wasn't stingy with my Stellar Planula, I would swap in the Compact Reflex sight for slightly more stability. Now, before I dive into any more of the build, I want to address the elephant in the room right now. Memento is a precision weapon through and through, meaning if you can't hit weak spots, then this thing is absolutely abysmal. It is 100% a weapon designed around that, which is why it's ideally used against bosses with giant weak spots, which, luckily for us, there are plenty of in one's human. With that in mind, there are 2 weapons that support the Memento depending on your environment that you can look to swap to. The Bullseye Sniper Rifle Bingo and the Fast Gunner Shotgun Netherworld. If you're solo against a boss or just wanting to make sure your Memento does as much damage as it can, the Bingo Sniper Rifle will be your best friend thanks to one particular weapon feature that it has. After switching to this weapon, the first hit will trigger Bullseye, guaranteed no matter where that shot lands. So just before you start wailing on a boss with Memento, pull Bingo out, shoot the boss once, and presto, you have the vulnerability debuff that Bullseye applies, allowing you to do 8% more damage to that boss for 12 seconds. Slap on a vulnerability amplifier to add another 8% on top of that. 100% this is my go-to when using Memento in most boss encounters. The other weapon you can look at picking up is the Fast Gunner Shotgun Netherworld. Since the build is already set up for Fast Gunner, Netherworld is a perfect fit as either an ad clear option or a secondary DPS option. You want to try and hit as many pellets per shot on a target as you can, as hitting all projectiles on a target will have a 50% chance to proc Fast Gunner. Once you've procced it twice, the next shot will, much like Memento, consume 1 round from the magazine and fire 5 additional projectiles for that next shot. After you burn through your magazine and reloaded, the first 12 rounds in that next mag will have a 20% buff to their attack value. Making it even more of an ad clear machine, the Netherworld deals suppression damage, giving it increased damage against deviants. The lightweight style calibration is ideal as it gives you a smaller mag size and faster reload, so you can maintain uptime on those buffed rounds as often as possible. And like Memento, Shooting Blitz is the ideal mod here to help you maintain your Fast Gunner buffs and increase damage. These are the attachments I like to run, again to maximize accuracy, and even though the stability is low, you can control the recoil relatively easily even when it's fully ramped up. As for the melee weapon, it's really up to you. At the time of recording this, a lot of people, myself included, are running the long axe to proc Fortress Warfare for 5 seconds of extra damage you get when standing inside the Fortress Warfare buff, and to capitalize on a Cradle mod to increase your damage even further. So by proccing Fast Gunner, you activate that Cradle mod by itself, so you don't even really need to worry about using the long axe if you don't want to. Realistically, you can run whatever you want here. Onto the armor for the build, and let's start with the key armor, the Oasis Mask. Plain and simple, this legendary mask increases the total amount of Fast Gunner stacks you can have by 10 and gives you an additional 1% attack for each stack, bringing the total when fully ramped up to a 15% increase in attack. Plain and simple, this is your best option for the Fast Gunner key armor to maximize your high burst damage with this build. As for the gear set, you'll be looking to main with this build. The Renegade set plays perfectly into the precision of Memento. Focused around ramping up your weak spot damage, you'll want to use 3 pieces of this set, giving you a 15% increase in reload speed, 10% increase in weak spot damage, and the third piece giving you the biggest jump in damage. Hitting the same enemy consecutively anywhere, even immune enemies or shielded enemies like Primor bosses, grants 1 stack of Archer's Focus, increasing weak spot damage by 4% per stack, up to 10 stacks for a total max increase of 40% weak spot damage. Meaning the longer you stay on a single target, the higher the stacks will go up to 10. Like I said earlier, you can actually pre-stack Renegade against immune or shielded targets, so as soon as their shield breaks, you're already at the max stacks of Archer's Focus and ready to deal as much damage as possible as soon as they become vulnerable. You will, however, lose half of your stacks every time you shoot a different target, meaning if you're 1 or 2 shotting lower tier enemies, you won't feel as much of a benefit from this set, as it's primarily meant for sustained damage on a single target. Even still, you're constantly adding stacks of weak spot damage, so it will always be working in your favor every time you hit any enemy. For the last 2 pieces, you'll want 2 of the Bastille set to further increase your weapon damage by 10% when your health is above 70%, and giving you another 20% increase to your reload speed, ensuring you can keep your Fast Gunner stacks up at all times. You could also opt for a more bargain build by swapping the 2-piece Bastille out with either 2-piece Agent for an extra 10% weak spot damage, or 2-piece Scout set to give you both 10% HP and 8% weapon damage. If I was to pick one of these 2 alternatives, I would go for the Scout set only if I could fully upgrade it to a point that it provides more HP and psi intensity than the Agent pieces that I have. From a consistency standpoint, this has been my go-to setup that I use when I'm just wanting to sit back and casually and mindlessly tackle bosses. However, there's also a high burst damage variant, like you saw in the opening clip of this video, that emphasizes a slightly different playstyle. That variant takes advantage of the Bastille set, specifically running 3 pieces of Bastille and 2 pieces of the Renegade set, with the boots on the ground as your key armor. 2 big things here that will absolutely skyrocket your damage. 1, the 3-piece Bastille set requires you to crouch to enter the Bastille state, giving you a massive 40% increase to weapon damage, with the caveat that upon exiting Bastille state, sprinting is disabled for 3 seconds and stamina consumption is increased by 100%. So you'll want to find a good position before a DPS phase starts, crouch, and wail on a boss until it's dead and you start moving around. And 2, adding boots on the ground will require the target you're shooting to be marked with bullseye, either by you or another player, but in return you gain a 30% increase to your overall damage. This is the absolute king of dishing out the highest possible damage that you can with Fast Gunner and Memento, so whether you want consistency and frequency or high damage spikes, you have 2 options to choose from for builds. The best part about these 2 builds is that you can run the exact same mod setup for either, meaning that as you either farm for these mods or convert your trash mods in hopes of obtaining them, you'll only need to farm 1 set to be squared away for both builds. Next up, I'll go over the mods you'll want to slot in each of your armor pieces. Like I said earlier in the video, weak spot and weapon damage will be the main attribute effects you'll be looking for, and in order to get both of these on one mod, you'll want to use the precision variants of these mods. Great Ones and Elite's damage is ideal, but take what you can get, as even damage to normal enemies will help with general ad clear. Between mag capacity and reload speed bonus, you want the reload bonus, but mag capacity works well enough. and HP percent is always nice for survivability. At the end of the day, use the mods you have with the best substats, aka attribute effects, with the big two to look out for being weak spot damage and weapon damage. On your helmet, you'll want to slot Precise Strike. Hitting a weak spot grants a 12% increase in weak spot damage for 3 seconds, stacking up to 3 times for a total of 36%. If you don't have any good substats on a Precise Strike, you can run a Momentum up in the meantime, again, only if that has better substats. On your mask is the second Fast Gunner mod for the build, Blitzkrieg. This mod is the final piece of the Fast Gunner puzzle, giving you another 5 Fast Gunner stacks, but more importantly, adding an extra 1% to your fire rate for each stack. So in total, you'll have a maximum of 20 Fast Gunner stacks when fully ramped up, which will give you a whopping 40% increase in attack and 40% increase to your rate of fire. Chasing the Fast Gunner variant of this mod can be a pain, but it's worth it, since this will guarantee that the mod has the substat that states when you're in Fast Gunner state, weapon damage is increased. Look for the other Fast Gunner substat that gives you weak spot damage when in Fast Gunner state as another priority. Gunslinger is a viable alternative since it gives it a big bump in weak spot damage and is great for short burst damage situations, but the added Fast Gunner benefits that Blitzkrieg makes it better in a longer fight. The chest piece is a gimme mod slot. More often than not, you'll just want to slot either a blue munitions amplifier or weak spot damage boost, which has both a weapon and a weak spot damage substat. If you're hurting on HP or just want more for whatever reason, Life Force Boost is an option so long as it's a precision variant. Or if you're struggling to stay alive while using this build to clear silos or just run and gun through normal gameplay, Rejuvenating will be your best friend to heal you while you're clearing adds. Onto the pants, and there are 2 options you can choose between: Unstoppable or 3 strikes. Unstoppable is only really ideal if you're fighting something at range, and even then you'll more often than not feel the benefit of 3 strikes in a fight since there's no range limiting effects, and it gives you a huge 50% increase in weak spot damage to your first 3 shots after reloading. Meaning the more stacks you have, the faster you're firing, the more you're reloading. Even with the free ammo from Memento's perks, the more you get those juiced first 3 shots in your magazine. On the gloves is where you can shy away from weak spot damage to get a huge bump in flat weapon damage with Munitions Amplifier. It'll give you a 15% increase to weapon damage on its own, and slotting a precision variant of Munitions Amplifier means you can roll both weak spot and weapon damage if you're lucky. If you don't have a good Munitions Amplifier, then your next best bet is Precise Strike, again with the precision variant with both weak spot and weapon damage. Last but not least are the boots, and like most builds, Covered Advance is best in slot since it gives the highest damage buff for the least buy-in. The Cradle is fairly self-explanatory and will change over time, but in the current Manibus scenario, these are what you'll be wanting to slot. Handgun enhancement to boost pistol and shotgun damage by 20% and refund 1 ammo per kill. Tactical combo gives you a 25% boost of weapon damage after reloading or swapping weapons. Steady hand gives you a 40% buff to weak spot damage when you proc Fast Gunner, and an additional 20% if you're shooting a target with a bullseye debuff. Bounty Hunter will give you a 25% weapon damage and 35% weak spot damage buff for 15 seconds after defeating a target that's marked with bullseye. Deviation Master gives you a 25% damage buff against elites and bosses when your deviation is fighting alongside you. Master Tactician gives you 25% damage buff against bosses only after using a tactical item. And the last 2 slots are really shooter's choice. I tend to run either Lone Walker if I'm solo, or side by side if I'm in a team, and finally Sprint for the movement speed. As for the food buffs, Crumbly Bread is the best option for its flat 25% increase to weapon damage. You can also run the Mixed Fried Hot Dog if you're marking your targets with bullseye. For the least ideal option, the Assorted Canned Fruit for 25% weak spot damage when your sanity is above 80%. You can also stack any of these with a Pan Fried Fish to give you either a 5% increase to weak spot damage or a 10% increase to your rate of fire. The Pan Fried Fish isn't super necessary, and in my opinion are kind of overkill, but if you're absolutely wanting to min-max your damage, you're going to want to use them. As for drink options, if you're applying bullseye, then the Stardust Raspberry Shaved Ice is great for extending the duration of your bullseye debuff. Otherwise, pick your favorite movement-based drink buff and you're good to go. I usually run either Stardust Energy Drink or the Iced Tea. Lastly, for the deviation of choice, and the clear front runner is the Lone Wolf's Whisper for its massive bump to weapon damage. Now, the higher the skill rating, the more of an increase in weapon damage you'll see. You see mine here has a skill rating of 4, meaning it increases weapon damage received by the attack target by 37.8%. You could also make a case for the Butterfly's Emissary, particularly the Starry Night one, as it would give you both the weak spot damage increase that's intrinsic to this deviation, but also add the Praise the Moon Starry Night buff to it, giving you up to 6% more weapon damage at night or 3% during the day. Now, I said this earlier in the video, and I'll echo it again here. This is a supremely precision-based build to run, but if you can hit your shots, you'll be rewarded with some of the highest damage in the game. I definitely don't recommend this build to anyone for their first option. I'd rather see somebody run something easy like Jaws and Unstable Bomber, or a Shrapnel build, maybe even a good Outer Space Power Surge build for their first and or primary build, and use this as a fun supplementary damage option. It's a very niche build to run and can be very unforgiving, but if you build into it and embrace the playstyle, you can have a ton of fun. I'm really looking forward to seeing just how crazy the damage numbers will be after I get more fragments for Memento and Netherworld from the Prism vs. Clash PvP event, so I can take this build into the winter scenario launching in October. If you've made it this far in the video, I just wanted to offer a quick thanks for sticking it out. These videos take a while to put together, and after taking a short break for personal reasons, it feels good to be back in the swing of things ahead of a new scenario. I've got a lot of builds sitting in my to-do box, so consider subscribing to the channel to see the next wave of builds. And if you enjoyed this video, a like is greatly appreciated. Let me know down in the comment section what you think. That's it for me. I'm done. I'm out, and I'll see y'all in the next one.